The soul, in turn, apart from the nature of the animate, must be impassive, merely causing sense perception in a yoke fellow or sympathetic. And if sympathetic, it may have identical experiences with its fellow, merely correspondent experiences. Desire, for example, in the animate may be something quite distinct from the accompanying movement or state in desiring faculty. The body, the live body as we know it, we will consider later. Let us take first the couplement of body and soul. How could suffering, for example, be seated in couplement? It may be suggested that some unwelcome state of the body produced a distress which reaches to sensitive faculty, in which in turn merges into soul. But this account still leaves the origin of the sensation unexplained. Another suggestion might be that all is due to an opinion or judgment. Some evil seems to have befallen the man or his belongings, and this conviction set up a state of trouble in the body and in the entire animate. But this account leaves still question as to the source and seat of judgment. Does it belong to the soul or to couplement? Besides the judgment that evil is present does not involve the feeling of grief, the judgment might very well arise, and the grief by no means follow. One may think oneself slighted and yet not be angry, and the appetite is not necessarily excited by the thought of pleasure. We are thus no nearer than before to any warrant for assigning these affections to couplement. It is any explanation to say that desire is vested in the faculty of desire and anger, in the irascible faculty and collective. All tendency is seated in the appetitive faculty. Such a statement of the facts does not help towards making the affections common to the couplement. They might still be seated either in the soul alone or in the body alone. On the other hand, if the appetite is to be stirred as in the carnal passion, there must be a heating of the carnal passion. There must be a heating of the blood and the bile, and well-defined state of body. On the other hand, the impulsive towards the good cannot be joint affection, but like certain others too. It would be, it would belong necessarily to the soul alone. Reason then does not permit us to assign all the affections to couplement. In the case of carnal desire, it will certainly be the man that desires, and yet, on the other hand, there must be desire in the desiring faculty as well. How can this be? Are we suppose that when the man originates the desire to the desiring faculty, moves to the order? How could the man have become to desire at all unless through a prior activity in the desiring faculty? Then it is the desiring faculty that takes the lead. Yet, how unless the body be first in the appropriate condition? It may be reasonable to lay down as a law that when any powers are contained by a recipient, every action or state expressive of them must be the action or state of the recipient, they themselves remaining unaffected as merely furnishing efficiency. But if this were so, then the animate is the recipient of the causing principle, the soul, which brings life to the couplement. This cause must itself remain unaffected. All the experiences and expressive activities of life being vested in the recipient and the animate. But this would mean that life itself belongs not to the soul, but to the couplement, or at least the life of the couplement would not be the life of the soul, Sense perception would belong not to the sensitive faculty, but to the container of the faculty. But if sensation is a movement traversing the body and culminating in soul, how can the soul lack sensation? The very presence of sensitive faculty must be assured a sensation to the soul. Once again, where is sense perception seated? In the couplement. Yet, how can the couplement have sensation independently of action in the sensitive faculty? The soul left out of count and soul faculty. The truth lies in the consideration that the couplement subsists by virtue of the soul's presence. This, however, is not to say that the soul gives itself as it is in itself to form either the couplement or the body. No, from the organized body and something else, let us say, at a light which the soul gives forth from itself. It's from a distinct principle, the animate, and in this principle are vested sense perception and all the other experiences found to belong to the animate. But the we. How have we sense perception? By the fact that we are not separated from the animate, so constitute, even though certainly other and nobler elements go to make up the entire many-sided nature of man, the faculty of perception in the soul cannot act by immediate grasping of sensible objects, but only by the discerning of the impression printed upon the animate by sensation. These impressions are already intelligibles, while the outer sensation is mere phantom of the other, of that in the soul, which is nearer to authentic existence as being an impassive reading of ideal forms. And by the means of these ideal forms, by which the soul wields single lordship over the animate, we have discursive reasoning, sense knowledge, and intellection. From this moment, we have peculiarly the we. Before this, there was only the ours. But at this stage stands the we, which is the authentic human principle, loftily presiding over the animate. There is no reason why the entire compound entity should not be described as the animate or living being, mingled in lower phases, but above that point, the beginning of the veritable man, distinct from all is kin to the lion. All that is of the order of multiple brute. And since the man so understood essentially the associate of the reasoning soul, in our reasoning it is this we that reasons, in that the use and act of reason is characteristic act of soul. And towards the intellectual principle, what is our relation? By this I mean not that faculty in the soul, which is one of the emanations from the intellectual principle, but the intellectual principle itself, which is the divine mind. This also we have possessed the summit of our being, and we have it either as common to all or our own immediate possessions, or again we may possess it in both degrees. That is, in common sense, it is indivisible, one everywhere and always itself, its entire self, and severally that each personality possesses its entire in the first soul, i.e., in the intellectual as distinguished from the lower phase of the soul. Hence we possessed the ideal forms also after two modes, in the soul as it were unrolled and separate in the intellectual principle. Concentrated 1. And how do we possess divinity? And that divinity is contained in the intellectual principle in authentic existence. And we have come third in order after these two, for we is constituted by the union of the Supreme. The undivided soul we read in that soul which is divided amongst living bodies. For note, we inevitably think of the soul through one and undivided in the all as being present to the bodies and division. Insofar as bodies and animates, the soul has given itself to each of the separate material masses, or rather, it appears to be present in the bodies by the fact that it shines into them. It makes them the living beings, not merging into the body, but by giving forth, without any change in itself, images or likeness of itself, like one face is caught in by many mirrors. The first of these images is sense perception, seated in the complement, and from this downwards all successive images are to be recognized as phases of the soul in lessening succession from one another until the series ends in the faculty of generations and growth in all of productions of offsprings efficient in its turn in distinction to the engendering soul, which has no direct action within matter, but produces by mere inclination towards what it fashions. The souls, then, in us will, in its nature, stand apart from all that can cause any of these evils, which man does or suffer. For all such evil as we have seen belong only to the animate, the couplement. But there is a difficulty in understanding how the soul can go guiltless if our mentation and reasoning are visited in it. For all of this lower kind of knowledge is delusion, and is the cause of much what evil is. We will have done evil. It is because we have been worst by our baser side. For a man is many, by desire or rage or some evil image. The misnamed reasoning that takes up with the false in the reality fancy has not stayed for the judgment of reasoning principle. We have acted at all call of the less worthy, just as matter of the sense spirit we sometimes see falsely, because we credit only the lower perception that the couplement without applying the test of reasoning faculty. The intellectual principle has held aloof from the act, and so guiltless, or as we may state it, all depends on whether we ourselves have or have not put ourselves into touch with the intellectual realm, either in the intellectual principle or within ourselves. For it is possible at once to possess and not to use. This we have marked off what belongs to the couplement from what stands by itself. The one group has the character of body and never existed apart from the body, while all that has no need of body for its manifestation belongs peculiarly to the soul. The understanding and the passing judgment upon sense impression is at the point of the vision of ideal forms, seeing them as it were with an answering sensation, i.e., with consciousness. This last is at any rate true of the understanding of the veritable soul. For understanding the true is the act of intellections. In many of its manifestations, it is assimilation and reconciliation of the outer to the inner.